Welcome to the Vergecast, the flagship podcast of the Xbox button. I'm your friend David Pierce, and I am doing a thing that I have to do like 2 or 3 times a year now, which is charge a bunch of iPads. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see it, but there's a stack of tablets on a shelf behind me, and it's a bunch of different iPads. There's a Remarkable tablet in there. There's a thing called the Daylight computer, and for some reason or another, a few times a year, I have to use a bunch of them to test something. This time it's new iPads. There's a new iPad Pro. I have it. I've been reviewing it. And in order to test it, I have to get out every other iPad that Apple makes and test them all. So I've been doing things like pull a 4-year-old iPad Pro out and install iPadOS 26 on it. It's a delight. My life is just filled with software updates that make everything glassy and make me like them less. Tech journalism is a delight. What are you going to do? Anyway, we are not here to talk about iPads. We did that last week. We'll do more of that later. We are here to do 2 things. First, we're going to talk about handheld consoles, and specifically these new ones, the Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X, that are supposed to be the ones that point to the true future of handheld gaming, and maybe don't. Then we're going to talk about, well, frankly, whether AI is making us stupid. And then we have a question from the Vergecast Hotline. Lots of fun stuff to get to today. But first, I have like 100 gigabytes of things downloading right now, and I have to go check and see what my data cap situation is. Wish me luck. This is the Vergecast. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Sean Hollister's here. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Sean, I feel really bad because every once in a while I feel like I just drag you on this show to yell at you about the state of console gaming. And once again, we're here to do this. And I'm sorry to subject this to you once again.
I just love yelling and being yelled at about the state of console gaming, though. Let's do it.
So I want to, in this case, like start pretty specific and then sort of like blow up to the size of the universe. And I think the place to start is with the devices you just reviewed last week, the Xbox Ally X and the Xbox Ally. 2, I would say like pretty hyped, pretty interesting handheld consoles. So I guess first, before they look huge, but we'll talk about that in a second. Why were people excited about this? Like, what is sort of riding on these devices in a way that isn't on your average, like, Lenovo Legion Go console?
This has been Microsoft's market to lose. It has an Xbox in your home, and that Xbox has been slowly drifting away. It hasn't sold quite the way they wanted to. In the meanwhile, the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch are the new hotness. You can take your games with you everywhere. You can play all of these games, not just all these PC games, but all of these PlayStation games that have been ported to PC anywhere you want on the go. Microsoft has all these PC makers lined up for something similar, something that could be that pick up and play handheld, but it hasn't unified them in any meaningful way because Windows is just a nightmare for handheld gaming. It requires these PC makers to do all these things, put all these things into their devices that have nothing to do with gaming, that distract from gaming. Microsoft's own employees are trying to get you to do various kinds of upsells. They want you to buy Microsoft 365. They want you to put Office on your handheld. They want you to put Copilot on your handheld. It's all getting in the way. They just needed to take ownership of this thing and give us an operating system that Asus and Acer and MSI can build something cool and useful around.
So,
and
wait, hold on. So, but you raise an interesting point, because I think there is an interesting gap that you just described there that I hadn't really thought of. Where on the one hand, if I'm Lenovo or Asus or somebody else, I have like signed a series of agreements with Microsoft for what I'm going to do with Windows, and that includes things like all the horrifying stuff that Microsoft makes you do with Windows. You know who doesn't have to abide by the licensing agreement you make with Windows is the Windows team and Microsoft. So it is like, is the difference between this one that this is by virtue of being called Xbox, there was an assumption that, okay, Microsoft and the Xbox team and the Windows team were involved in this in a different way and thus could maybe like had a different set of levers to pull to make this thing work?
That's the excitement. Like I cornered one of the architects of this initiative at CES last year, and I got him to tell me that Microsoft's going to be bringing the best of Xbox and Windows together. And we thought this was going to be years down the road. And maybe it unfortunately still is. But we thought we thought it was going to be years down the road that there was going to be a PlayStation handheld and an Xbox handheld. The executives of both companies, both Sony and Microsoft, had come out and said, we're going to do this whole thing, but it's going to take us a few years. And then here I am talking to this executive. He's like, well, we're going to fix some of this a lot sooner. He told me, we're just going to fix it in Windows. We're going to make Windows better. And here is an Xbox guy telling me he's going to make Windows better. And this is all I've been asking for several years as I've watched this Steam Deck kind of dominate this nascent space. Please fix it. So make it so that this handheld actually stays asleep when I put it to sleep. Make it so that I can press a button, start playing, press the button again, stop playing, and my game is there ready for me to pick it up when I come back. That's what I need. That's what I want. Maybe it's finally happening, and maybe not. We'll get to that. Right?
Yeah, let's get to it now. So I think you've given it away a little bit, but the TLDR of these things is they're really not very good. Walk me through kind of the pros and cons of the Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X.
Yeah, so it's built on both of them. There's two of them. One of them is $600. One of them is $1,000. They're the most expensive Xboxes ever made. But as PC gaming handhelds, they kind of come from good components. They come from a good base. It's based on the ROG Ally X, which is very similar looking, except that one of them has these big honkin' prongs, these big grips, and the other one does not.
You love prongs. You are on the record loving prongs.
Prongs rock. Prongs rock. That's my headline on a story on The Verge is Prongs rock. It makes this thing more comfortable to hold. It's still got a giant honkin' 80 watt-hour battery in here. It's got a proven screen, not the best screen in the world, but it's a VRR screen that makes games seem pretty smooth at 1080p. Only 7 inches, but we can get past that. It's got maybe a slightly better chip in the Z2 Extreme on this one. More memory. It's a good base for a handheld, and we liked the ROG Ally X with Windows on it, with the exception that it had Windows on it. So, we're coming from somewhere good. Meanwhile, the other one, the white one, the $600 model, has a chip which is effectively the same chip effectively as the one in the Steam Deck, which has been lauded for good efficiency. It's a one that, you're not playing all the latest games on at high resolution, but if you're playing, more lightweight games, you can take that chip and you can get many hours of battery life on it. They stick some more battery life on here. But the first sign we get that maybe something a little weird is going on here is they release a promo video. Microsoft and Asus released this promo video where they are kind of promising the world from these two new handhelds. They make them sound like the best thing since sliced bread, that they are going to be your Xbox console experience, finally, anywhere you want to take it with you.
We're working in close partnership with Asus on a brand new handheld called the Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X.
The best game library on the go basically changes everything.
The whole "this is an Xbox" campaign where they're like, oh yeah, Xbox is your phone, Xbox is your TV, Xbox, that amped up to 11. And so,
which to be clear is like the dream, right? Like you and I are still on the same page that is a thing that I want, right?
Yes, please, please
just
give us the Xbox games. Let them play on the handheld.
Yeah.
Let me press the power button, have it go to sleep.
The Nintendo Switch, but it's an Xbox, is like very straightforwardly a thing that I think you and I and lots of people want.
100%. 100%. And one of the reasons they want it is because the Steam Deck, the Steam OS, is not perfect. It does the Nintendo Switch thing of you press the button, it goes to sleep, you press it, it wakes up, you play the games, you just select the games and they work most of the time pretty well. Not quite as well as a Switch, but pretty dang well. But that is for games on Steam and games that you sideload from other stores like Epic Games Store, Battle.net, and so on. It takes a little bit of effort to get the other games on there. They won't always work the same way. There's a lot of games with anti-cheat that do not work on Linux, that have refused to figure out how to make it work on Linux because they're worried about not only cheaters, they're worried about people figuring out how their anti-cheat system works by using Linux to reverse engineer it and then ruining the game for everyone. So that is not hurdle that everyone is willing to surmount is the side loading and the missing your games that require anti-cheat. So some people say they want Windows because it has all the stores. They're right there. They don't need to worry about whether a game will run or not because of anti-cheat. So if Microsoft can bridge the gap and give you the pick up and play experience plus all the stores experience plus anti-cheat, they'd really be onto something.
It's so like, this is the thing that drives me so crazy about this space is everything you just said just makes me nod along. And I'm like, yes, this seems like it's good. And the thing I found so interesting about your review and your experience with the Ally and Ally X is, like you said, it's built on pretty good hardware. Like in a certain sense, I would be less annoyed at what you found if there was something like fatally wrong with the chip that they picked, or it's like, oh man, the screen sucks, or whatever. But it's like, no, actually, the list of hardware choices is more or less a good one. And yet, I would say my first experience with these things was a series of screenshots from you trying desperately to get this thing to start running properly in order to play games, which just to me felt like a perfect microcosm of the entire Windows handheld gaming experience all in one go.
It really was, and we should describe what those are. But let me preface it with this: I did not think that series of screenshots I sent you, David, of me trying for hours to get this thing even to just be ready to go. I did not think that was going to be the experience that anyone else other than a reviewer would have.
Sure.
It says in the reviewer's guide for these handhelds that it's going to be a different experience at launch. We're going to let people do this. We're going to let people do that.
Which is, to be fair, A, sometimes true, and B, more often a story we hear a lot as reviewers that turns out to be actually it's pretty close to what most people are going to get.
They've already shipped these out to Best Buy. There are pictures of them behind glass at Best Buys around the country, people waiting to just pull them out. And so what happens is you'll open this handheld up, you'll turn it on, you'll connect it to your Wi-Fi, and then it will spend the next, depending on your internet, depending on which handheld you buy, maybe the next hour, maybe the next 40 minutes, maybe the next hour and a half, installing Windows updates on top of Windows without you having any control over the interface. It'll just be like, here, let it sit here and charge and do this thing for a while. And then once you've done that, you'll go to Asus's app and you'll download more updates. And maybe you'll go to Windows Update and you'll download more updates if Microsoft doesn't manage to get those ones at least into the initial 40 to an hour install package. And after that, then it's install your game stores and then it's install your games. And it's kind of like a half of a day to get this thing fully up and running to play your games.
Immediately kind of fairly neatly undoes the thing that you were saying has a chance to be an advantage over something like the Steam Deck, which is there is just enough complication in the Steam Deck that it's like, wouldn't it be great if there was just a thing you could log into that would play all your games? And this is so immediately not that thing.
It's not.
But I think even once you get through all of that, and even once the thing is sort of in its final form, I think we were hoping there was going to be some big new idea about how this thing works and what the UI of it should be like and what the actual and like what it always seemed to me is that it should be like, do you remember in old Android phones, you would see the skin atop Android phones, but if you went down like 3 or 4 levels, you could find like a menu in settings that was still stock Android.
Yeah.
And that would be, you'd be like, oh, now I know this is gingerbread, right? And it's like, that's what I want out of this. Like, I'm fine with it being Windows underneath. I don't want to see Windows unless I really deliberately, intentionally want to see Windows. And I am truly bummed by the fact that it seems like this is just still fundamentally a Windows PC. That like the Xbox of it all is just not nearly as much as it seems like it ought to be, even on the most Xboxy version of this thing so far.
They could get there. Like, there is a road from here to there if they want to say Xbox is the skin atop Windows, and they're certainly moving down that road. Xbox is the skin atop Windows. We're going to make everything else disappear. They're like halfway there.
Okay.
They could properly add the Microsoft Store and a browser and a whole bunch of other creature comforts into the Xbox interface. Maybe they'll get rid of the online account requirement so you can just, log in with Steam if you want to do that instead. Maybe they'll integrate the accounts better. They can make things more streamlined and seamless and Xboxy on top of Windows. But the on top of Windows part is part of the problem. It means that this operating system doesn't know how to make a chip that's like an enhanced version of the Steam Deck chip as good or better than the Steam Deck experience. It's weaker. It's less powerful than it should be, even though it should be more powerful. I can plug in this Steam Deck version to the wall with a power outlet, and it should have more performance, but instead it has less. It would not solve critical things like expecting the system to save your game and sleep when you press the power button.
The overall story of these, I think, is that they don't represent the kind of leap forward we were hoping that they would, right? Which is like, we've been waiting for sort of the Microsoft, like the Surface-y version of this, that is like both the high-end one, but also the one that is like, hey, other manufacturers, here's how you do this, right? It is the thing that should be the sort of tip of the spear for all of these. These are clearly not that. How do they measure up to the other Windows handhelds out there? There's now a bunch of them. I would say, like you were saying earlier, they're all built on relatively similar foundations. Like, even for those people, even knowing all the problems that they have, even knowing Windows is still not the correct platform to be doing this the way that you would like it to be, are these compelling in comparison to the other devices out there?
In order to compete with all the rest of the handhelds, it really, and to surpass every other Windows handheld out there, all it needed to do was sleep reliably, have slightly better performance than with stock Windows, and let me easily access my Steam games. And instead, what we've got is something that does not sleep reliably. Maybe that almost the way there with the black one, but not quite. Obfuscates Steam and tries to thrust all this Xbox stuff front and center, which Tom does say works a little better if you're deep into the Xbox community, just not the way I want, and does not feel like a console. They're propping it up as this console thing. It is not an Xbox console. It does not play Xbox console games. If you back away from all this and you're like, okay, let's take other handhelds that should cost around $1,000 and compare it to the Xbox Ally X at $1,000. This thing has better grips. It feels more comfortable to hold than them, but it's now maybe a little bit harder to do the things that I want to do with it if I'm not buying it for an Xbox experience. And it doesn't have a flagship screen, for example. This screen is the same screen they shipped in a $600 handheld a few years ago. It's the same one they shipped in an $800 handheld last year. Now you're paying $1,000 for that screen, whereas we now have 8-inch devices. We have 8-inch devices like this MSI Claw and this amazing Legion Go 2. I'll hold that thing up with beautiful screens, very little bezel on these things. They look way the heck better at around that $1,000 mark.
I'm now starting to wonder, and this is the sort of size of the universe thing that I'm thinking about reading this review that you did, are we even sure this is possible? Like, I think you and I agree that the thesis for Microsoft here, that actually what we should do is divorce the hardware from the software, and that actually what people want is ways to play games lots of places that is not a giant box in their living room. Maybe they have the giant box in the living room, but what I want is to be able to play my games everywhere. And I want games that scale up and down based on where I am. I want games that work different ways on different devices. Like, I want games that exist everywhere. That feels like the right idea. Lots of folks are moving towards that. I'm starting to wonder if it's possible even for Microsoft to get there, or if they have just gone down some completely wrong path, and the idea of the correct Windows-based gaming handheld should just die.
I feel like one of the persistent problems with Microsoft's gaming strategy outside of the Xbox console itself is they're not really trying to sell a handheld. They're trying to sell an operating system to a bunch of partners that want to control the experience and make the best experience they can for their customers.
So wait, okay, so you just said something I think is interesting. Can I
Okay,
let me just
yeah.
pause you on that, because what I thought you were going to say is Microsoft's not trying to sell you a gaming handheld; they're trying to sell you games. And I think the shift that we have been seeing is these companies are increasingly seeing hardware as, if not quite a loss leader, like not the relevant piece of the puzzle, right? Like I can make more money by putting Fortnite on every device that you own than I can selling you a Fortnite gadget. And that to me is where it's like, that's clearly where this business is going. Like it or not, that is clearly where this business is going. And yet you said Windows. And so I'm like, does Microsoft just not get it? They spent how many tens of billions of dollars to become a game company? Like, sell me games. Be in the business of selling me games.
They have an Xbox team and they have a Windows team. And maybe they can build a hybrid team and create an operating system that makes sense to just sell you the games. But there are the conflicting priorities here of they also want to sell an OS to these handheld makers. What we expect to happen, what Tom and I expect to happen is, yes, the future of Xbox is not going to be just about the box. Yes, the games are the most important piece of the puzzle, and they probably are going to start to build those games on top of Windows, on top of these kinds of PC chips designed for the PC ecosystem, which includes Xbox, instead of designing them specifically for an Xbox console. So the problem we have today or I should say next May, the problem we have next May, when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, and you can play it on an Xbox, but you can't play it on an Xbox Ally because there's no PC port, that kind of thing maybe goes away if Microsoft uses all of its studios, all of its muscle to push the industry in the PC development first direction.
And the PC ecosystem now does kind of include all of these consoles, right? Like architecturally, the Xbox, the PlayStation, the PC, all of these things are very close to each other now, right?
Going for over a decade now, since the Xbox One, these systems have all been using AMD x86 chips that are quite similar to one another, that have similar levels of performance between the Xbox and the PlayStation, though there's wrinkles everywhere. And so when it allowed a device like the Steam Deck to come out and be the success it was, 4 million or whatever, it's not a huge success, but it allowed it to be the success it was because it's the same architecture, the same kind of games are being made for these consoles at a console level of performance that the Steam Deck just targets that. Some folks at Valve can say, oh, it looks like AMD has a chip coming up 2 years from now that's going to give me a 720p resolution experience at 30 frames per second of the same thing I can see at consoles at 1080p 60 right now. Would people buy a 720p 30 experience of the same kinds of games? Seems like they might. Let's go ahead and do that. That chip didn't exist before. The architecture wasn't all aligned before. Now it is. Now it's way easier to make those things line up. But when the game development efforts do align in the Microsoft camp and the Sony camp and everybody's, hopefully in all the game developers camps, and everybody's just publishing a game and selling it to all the places, Microsoft does want to have a handheld that encourages people to buy them, take them everywhere, do that thing that the Steam Deck users talk about, where it's like, wow, there's a sale coming up on games. Might as well have some more now that I can play them in the bathroom, now that I can play them in the bus, now that I can play them in the train, and not worry about buying specific cartridges that only fit this handheld.
I start to worry, again, reading reviews like yours of the Xbox Ally, that it's like, well, if Microsoft putting the Xbox name on something can't pull all of these pieces, the games, the hardware, the software, together in a way that works and feels coherent, maybe nobody can. But you sound like you're thinking if we're not there yet, we're at least maybe on a path towards that over time. You seem optimistic.
I think it's a wake up call for one thing. I think it's a big wake up call. The way this launch was handled, I'm sure they knew weeks or months ago, after they realized that things were not altogether the way they should be, that they were going to get some less than enthusiastic reviews of these handhelds.
And they have sure been less than enthusiastic.
Sure have. Polygons, also an excellent one. If you want to read some more some more people trotting on this thing. But because there's been this wake-up call, not today, but maybe months ago from Microsoft, they're going to have to shift their strategy again. They're either going to have to really put the right teams on this to make the skin bulletproof on top of Windows and really amp up reducing how much Windows there is under the hood so that that doesn't get in your way. Or they're going to say, screw it, we need the next Xbox, the next family of Xbox consoles, which will include a handheld, to have a purpose-built architecture, a purpose-built software architecture, I should say, that actually feels like a game console. We'll put that on our next Xbox. We'll put that on our next handheld too. This Xbox Ally was a test balloon, but it wasn't the real Xbox handheld. We'll bring that to you later. That's what I expect will happen.
I hope you're right, but you only get so many swings at that, And I think that the size and confidence of this marketing effort from Microsoft that everything is on Xbox is, again, I look at that and I'm like, this is a great idea. What if you shipped it? Like, that'd be fun. Maybe do it successfully, and then this will all be fine. I hope you're right. I really do. I continue to believe that this is the right idea, and that Microsoft's what is written on Microsoft's whiteboard is this is the future of gaming, I think is the future of gaming. And I worry that Microsoft is screwing it up so badly that no one else is going to try, and we're all going to go back to console exclusives that run on a box in my living room. I don't want that.
Don't love it. Wouldn't be the worst thing ever if they also subsidize the consoles again.
Okay, before we go.
People could afford them.
Before we go, I have a question and a complaint. Which would you like to hear first?
Can I ask a question first?
Sure.
Okay. We talked a long time ago on this Vergecast, I feel like, about you deciding whether you were going to buy a Steam Deck or not. Did you?
Welcome to my question and my complaint, Sean. I'm going to give you my complaint first, because my complaint leads to my question. My complaint is about the Nintendo Switch 2, which I own and enjoy very much. 4 games that were built for the Switch 2. Donkey Kong Bonanza, fabulous. Mario Kart World, fabulous. Every other game made by a company not Nintendo seems like they shipped it to other devices, and then they found a knob that said make it 35% worse, turned it, and shipped it for the Switch 2. I hate it. The thing I said, I play FIFA a lot. It's called EAFC. For all the people who are going to email me, I'm aware of this. It's called FIFA. Leave me alone. The solution for the new game on the Switch 2 was just to limit it to 30 frames per second. You just can't run it any faster than that on the Switch 2. And so now I have this blocky, jittery soccer game all the time. Turns out that sucks. And the last game played better. So everybody is making these incredible new games, and then they just make it shitty and ship it for the Switch 2. And that is awful. And one of the things I was excited about the Switch 2 is that there has been more developer interest, and there are more third-party games. Boy. They're bad, and it's bumming me out.
Welcome to Nintendo.
Yeah, I wish I had known. So which brings me to my question. Which is, Sean, should I buy a Steam Deck? We've been doing this for so long. And now there's rumors that there's going to be some new hardware. There's some smoke that Valve is up to some stuff. Sean, should I buy a Steam Deck?
I don't think we're getting a new Steam Deck. I don't think a Steam Deck 2 is imminent. I think it's safe to wait. I may have bought somebody in my life a Steam Deck recently, having told myself, totally fine to get them one.
Okay.
It's good stuff. Do you want to play the latest games at acceptable settings? You're talking about how stuff on Switch 2 is this shovelware. That's what people call it. The shovelware that happens on the Nintendo platforms. It looks like they just shoveled it on there and turned the dial and spun down the graphics.
They're shoveling better games now, which is something. No, sincerely, that is something. Instead of crappy old games, it's pretty good newer games, but it's still shovelware.
developers have figured out now how to take advantage of everything the Steam Deck has, and the stuff that runs there. You can play a lot of great shit there. If you want it to run every new hot game that comes out, it's going to look like trash there. I'm sorry. There's just no way around it. So don't expect it to play Indiana Jones or whatever, Grand Theft Auto 6 when it comes out. It will not run that at good settings, if at all. Probably won't run that at all because there'll be some kind of anti-cheat that Rockstar throws in there, some kind of terrible launcher or whatever. And that'll be even further down the road because the PC version of that isn't going to come right away.
We may need to have like a real conversation in like May where I just sit down in front of my microphone with $1,000 in cash and you just tell me what to buy so I can play GTA 6. Because most of the stuff you're talking about, I'm like, I'm not a good enough gamer to like need the stuff at super high settings anyway. And B, most of the stuff that I play most of the time is not like, day one release stuff. I'm happy to wait it out and play the old games, and like that's all fine. I do want to play a lot of GTA 6 next year, and it is increasingly clear to me that I am going to need to spend a lot of money on a device I do not currently have. And at some point you and I are going to have to talk that out.
Yeah.
And then the end of that segment will just be me throwing money at my microphone and running away.
Can you throw it through the camera? I'll just take it.
Can I just have like 3 or 4 of the handhelds that you have? That'll solve all of my problems. I'll daisy chain them together, and I'll have one kick-ass Windows PC. Yeah, this will be great. All right, we got to take a break. But Sean, will you come back at the end of the show to do a hotline question? I got a hotline question that I think you and I should really talk about. I think it'll be fun.
I'm ready to be ambushed.
All right, cool. We need to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about what AI is doing to our brains. Be right back.
Support for this show comes from Shopify. Starting a business is exciting, but once the excitement wears off, you might realize it also means juggling 1,000 tiny tasks. Shopify gets that. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. And they want to help with everything from sales to design to marketing. Can't code? No problem. Shopify's got slick, ready-made templates that actually look good. If you need help writing product descriptions or touching up photos, they've got you covered there too, with their built-in AI tools. And if you hit a wall, their 24/7 support team is right there for you. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into reality with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Vergecast. Go to shopify.com/Vergecast. That's shopify.com/Vergecast. Support for the show comes from Framer. In the olden days, back in the late 1900s, if you wanted a website, you either had to learn how to code or you had to pay a lot of money to hire someone to do it for you. But today, we have the luxury of website builders that can do the hard work for you. And if you use Framer, you get a full-featured professional design tool completely free. Framer already built the fastest way to publish beautiful, production-ready websites, and it's now redefining how we design for the web. With the recent launch of Design Pages, a free canvas-based design tool, Framer is more than a site builder. It's a true all-in-one design platform, from social assets to campaign visuals to vectors and icons, all the way to a live site. Framer is where ideas go to live, start to finish. Framer even helps you design more than websites, create social assets, campaign visuals, icons, and even site resources all in one place. Ready to design, iterate, and publish all in one tool? Start creating for free at framer.com/design and use code VERGE for a free month of Framer Pro. That's framer.com/design and use promo code VERGE. framer.com/design, promo code VERGE. Rules and restrictions may apply.
All right, we're back. Hayden Field is here. Hi, Hayden.
Hi, happy to be
Lots
here.
of you on the Vergecast recently. This makes me very happy.
It's been a blast. I'll come on anytime.
It's just AI shenanigans everywhere you look. This is what we do here now.
Every single day.
So the sort of big, heady question I want to spend some time talking about, and I think this is a thing we're, like, as a society going to spend a lot of time talking about, is essentially what AI is doing to our brains and our ability to use them. And I think we're at this fascinating moment where like these tools like ChatGPT and the rest have been around long enough that we're starting to get real sort of useful longitudinal research on like what it means to use them and how we're using them. And we're past some of the like, thrilling novelty of it all. And so we're starting to get like real actual evidence about how they are changing the way that we work and think and all this stuff. But also we're still so early in this phase that it's like, we don't know yet if this is just the same moral panic that happens every time something happens, right? Like rewind to any new anything and everybody thought it was going to destroy our brains, right? Like calculators were going to destroy our brains and the printing press was going to destroy our brains and newspapers were going to destroy our brains and the radio was going to destroy our, like pick anything you want and it was always going to ruin society. And most of them have not. Some of them have, but we don't know yet which one AI is. But I think especially over the last few months, we've gotten a couple of really interesting studies that have tried to dig into this stuff in a pretty meaningful way. And just before we started recording, I told you one of the main ones I want to talk about is this big study out of MIT that basically was looking at what our brains are doing on ChatGPT and how we think about tasks and how we accomplish tasks when we're given LLMs to use or not. And you just told me that literally just before we started recording, this is like not a bit I'm doing. This is like a thing that happened. I'm very excited about it. Just before we started recording, you were talking to the person who led this study. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I just shot her an email because I figured, let's get it straight from the horse's mouth and talk about, what really happened here and how they tested people and what some media outlets might have gotten wrong. When I was looking at the study, I saw that they had only linked to certain outlets because they said some had like sensationalized their findings. So I just wanted to make sure we really got right, like what they found in this study.
So just to really quickly, let me just like briefly explain the study for people who have not read. It's like 206 pages. You should read all of them. They're fascinating. I don't know anything about EEGs, so most of it made no sense. But it's very interesting. And essentially, as I understand it, and you should correct me if I'm wrong, because I think it sounds like a lot of people are getting this wrong, and I'm sure I'm one of them. Basically, they took this group of people, divided them into 3 sections, basically. There was a group of people that were given access to a large language model. There was a group of people that were given access to a search engine, and there was a group of people that were given access to neither. And they gave them an essay writing task 4 different times over the course of, I think, several months, and basically charted how their brains were working as they were doing those tasks. And then at the end, on the 4th task, the people who had to use only their brains were given access to an LLM on the 4th try, and vice versa. The people who had LLM access the first 3 then had to just use their brains for the 4th. And we should get to what they find, but I'm curious what you learned from talking to the person that led it.
Yeah, they did swap up the groups on the last try, which was interesting. And the thing that I thought was the most interesting is that when they swapped the groups at the end, the same exact results, which we'll talk about in a second, happened. So it wasn't like if you had been doing something one way, there was a compounding effect or vice versa. It was whenever you did one thing, the same thing happened. And whenever someone else did that thing happened. And there was no, compounding problems or benefits. It was just when you did it using X, Y, Z type of technology or no type of technology, they saw a pretty similar result. Okay.
And I would say broad strokes, my understanding of the results of this study, and this has been a pretty controversial study. It's a relatively small number of people. They released this pre-peer review, which is a like peer review is an important part of the academic process. Like this is an early thing, and I think they put it out basically saying, yes, this is early, but we think it's important to start getting this stuff out there. But basically what I would say, my understanding of the findings is that the people who had the most access to the LLMs came to rely on them almost completely over the course of doing the task. And that the more they had access to these tools, over and over they came back. And by the 3rd time they were doing these essays with the LLMs, they were essentially just copying and pasting the output of the LLMs. And all the people who used them, this is my favorite detail from this, basically ended up with the same essay. No matter how you started, no matter what you prompted, they said there were people who started in a language other than English and then translated it back into English. Like a remarkably similar thing appeared at the end. And the funniest thing about this is by all accounts, they had human raters and AI judges, all of whom agreed that the essays they came up with were actually like pretty good. But that was not the point, right? The point wasn't, can you use AI to write a good essay? The point was, what is your brain doing in this process? And they found essentially that the people with that were doing less and relying on the AI models more. And that was increasing as time went on. But then, like you said, once they flipped back to having to use their brain, it wasn't like they were permanently ruined forever, I think was the thing that I found. And I would guess, not to put words in our researchers' mouths, but that was a thing that I think a lot of people picked up on incorrectly. And I think that the narrative of this study has been that, like, if you use it, your brain will go to mush and you will never be able to use it again. And I think from reading this study, my understanding is like, that's not the finding. The finding is that when you have it in front of you, you will use your brain differently, not it will destroy your brain in perpetuity. Is that fair? Is that your read?
Yeah, the researchers said that they recommend like longer term longitudinal impact studies on the usage, but this was just short term, like seeing what parts of your brain lit up or which brain networks were being more engaged, and that was it, not kind of charting what's going to happen in the future.
Right. It's not that the people came out of this like unable to spell their names because they'd used an LLM 3 times. It was just that, like, when they had it, it was very clear that they were doing less of the like critical thinking part of writing an essay and more of prompting an AI to basically give them the same thing that everybody else was getting. I will say, this study, a lot of people have not talked about the search engine part of this study, but maybe the single most damning part of this study to me is the people who were given access to a search engine and basically just wrote the essay that Google decided to give them based on how Google's keywords rank for ad prices. That is like just overwhelmingly, you search for something and Google gives you whatever it feels like giving you, whether or not that has any bearing on what is like useful and good. And so the idea that like using AI is bad for your brain and having access to Google is not, disagree. If anything, you could argue that they are like equally bad for your brain. But I do wonder, like, is it a fair read to come out of a study like this for you as a reader of this and for them as the researchers to say it is bad for your brain to have access to these tools?
I don't think they'd say it was bad for your brain because your whole brain was functioning the whole time, no matter which group you were in. It was just the connectivity was really different. So you didn't have the same amount of engagement among all your brain networks. And also something that she told me on the phone, the lead author, Natalia, was that directionality was impacted. So basically, this is a really simplified version for us because we are not researchers on the brain. Yeah. But something that they were tracking was where data flowed, which direction to which direction data flowed within the brain. And they saw there was a lot less flow when people were using LLMs. So, if the information is flowing from the front of your brain to the back of your brain, the back to the front, that's super oversimplified. But that's what she told me, that looking at that specifically, the directionality, there was a lot less flow when people were using LLMs, and that's not good in the moment, at least. It's not, they put it like this, the cognitive cost of using an LLM. So basically, the brain connectivity did systematically scale down when people were using search engines, and even more so when people were using LLMs. So I think that the main kind of takeaway is that using your brain on its own is the best for your brain, probably, at least in the moment, because, those people, that group, exhibited the strongest, widest ranging brain network activity. So clearly, their brains were just lighting up. It was a party in there. There were a ton of thoughts happening. Other people, less so. But also, I think it's important to note this isn't just happening with AI. Like you said, David, it's like, I remember when we got GPS systems in our cars for the first time and I forgot how to drive to the grocery store or to one of my friends' houses. I didn't remember how to do things that I used to do if I didn't practice. So it's kind of like that. I mean, I think it does happen with every technology. Obviously brain connectivity also scaled down in this study with search engines. So I think it's just about, I used to kind of roll my eyes when my friends would put their phone down and say, oh, like, I'm going to try to remember the name of this person instead of looking it up in my phone, or I think I'm going to try to remember the name of this movie instead of Googling it. But now I'm like, maybe we should all be doing that, because I mean, it does use a different muscle or whatever part of the brain that you and I don't know how to refer to. It uses that in a different way. And, under engagement is something they saw and weaker neural connectivity was something they saw in the group using LLMs, which I just don't love the sound of.
Yeah, that's fair. I just want everyone listening to and watching this, by the way, to just imagine that every 2 minutes, like a little asterisk appears above our heads that just says, disclaimer, not a brain scientist.
Yes.
That's important. But I think like the way you describe that makes me think of, actually, I was just reading another study that Microsoft researchers did earlier this year, basically looking at how people doing knowledge work tasks engage in critical thinking. And they define critical thinking in some really interesting ways. But I think like however you imagine that in your head is a useful enough heuristic for what we're talking about here. And essentially what they found is that if you trust yourself to do something, like if you think you are an expert in a task, AI is actually like productive and useful and helpful in that task, and it will allow you to do it better. That it is a way of taking something you do well and magnifying it even further. But AI as a replacement, like as a way to fill in something you don't know how to do or don't have confidence in, is a huge problem because it makes you more confident in this deeply imperfect technology, and you just kind of plug in a prompt and let it do its thing and trust whatever it comes out with because you don't know any better. And so over and over, they're coming in this study basically being like, what we need to figure out how to do is A, help people gain competence themselves, and B, plug in AI in a way that is like additive and productive, not a solution so that you don't have to use your own brain. And I think like the way you describe it's so funny you mentioned the like trying to remember a person's name, because this is a thing I go through all the time now. And there's like, people have been talking about this for forever, right? That Google like ruined the bar debate about who was, who was in that movie, or like which one of those made more money or whatever, like all of these things that just have answers but are fun to talk about anyway. Doing that on purpose is like stupid, but kind of fun and productive anyway, that it's like, well, I'm just going to sit here and try to remember the name of that song, even though I could Google it and it would simplify everything, because like I should probably work on my brain. Like feels ridiculous, but I think is actually borne out in a lot of this stuff, that like using your brain on purpose is good.
Shocking, but true.
Yeah.
And what you said about AI making some things better is true, because even in that MIT Media Lab study, they found that it does help with speed and execution and grunt work and organization of thoughts. And the other thing about that study is that a lot of neuroscientists apparently say EEGs, which they use to test the brain activity, are kind of a flawed method because they're outside the brain. So it's kind of like they liken it to standing outside a stadium and listening to the crowd's reaction. So you can hear when the crowd roars and, the vibes that are going on, but you can't really, figure out exactly what's going on and, exactly what people are feeling and when and which areas. So, it's a flawed approach, but, it does tell us something. So I think that's important. But what you said about, feeling confident, I think is so important, because it reminds me of learning languages. Like if you are super playing it safe and taking it easy with learning a language, I feel like you never really, and I think studies back this up, but don't quote me on this, but you never really get fluent, because the way that the brain learns a lot of time is when you do feel uncomfortable or frustrated or not like safe in terms of, saying what you want to say. And then it causes you to build new neural pathways and remember connections and things you might not have gotten before. That's why immersion programs are so good for building language fluency. It's because you're forced to just figure out how to say something, even if you have to be creative and kind of talk your way around something or, build new connections. You just have to figure it out. And that's why people that get fluent in a language do that stuff. And I think it's kind of important to note here too.
Totally. So what do you think the reaction has been in the AI industry to some of this research? I mean, this MIT study, we talked about on purpose, because this it caused some real debate and kerfuffle in the AI industry. There were a lot of people who just reflexively didn't like the study, didn't like the way that it was done, didn't like the whatever. But this question of is AI making us stupid is very much in the ether of the AI industry right now. What are you hearing from folks who are starting to reckon with this question of like, what is AI doing to people's brains? Are they even reckoning with it at all?
I think a lot of times they're not reckoning with it. Like when I reached out to Anthropic and OpenAI before this recording, like a few days ago, I just wanted to see what they would say, and they did not respond at all. So 0 response. And I think, a lot of people just don't want to acknowledge it. I do think there's a lot of controversy over the study itself and the results and the small sample size and the EEGs. But I also think that, there's a question why we're not seeing more research starting right now about the long-term effects of using these systems. And, there's a lot of questions out there right now about how it does affect your brain, or even if it doesn't affect your brain in a certain way, how it affects how you think or how you act. We saw a bunch of hugely problematic situations with teens and young people recently, committing suicide after months of confiding in a chatbot, or, going through a lot of mental health struggles and having to be hospitalized. So it's like interesting, and just, we need more research on this stuff, and we need to be looking really hard at it. And a lot of companies don't want to reckon deeply with it because companies want people to use their services and rely on them. I mean, that's how you make money as a tech company. So, up engagement, up the amount of time that someone spends on a platform, figure out how to kind of insert it into every part of their life. We just saw OpenAI launch Pulse, which is supposed to be like, the way that you start your day every day, and a routine with ChatGPT. So I think these companies want their products to be embedded in every part of your life, and that is how they're going to make money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so torn on this because I think like your Google Maps example from a few minutes ago is such an interesting one, because I spent a lot of time over the years wondering whether it's bad that I don't know how to get anywhere anymore. And like, it's sort of seriously, like, I don't know how to get nearly as many places as I used to. That's certainly true. And the number of places, like my wife will make fun of me because I will Google Maps the 3 miles to the airport, despite the fact that I've done that drive 650,000 times. Like I should be able to do that drive in my sleep. And I put on Google Maps every single time. And I say like, oh, I'm checking for traffic, but I'm just not 100% sure how to do any of that anymore. And I don't know if that's bad. And I think in a lot of ways, like, I don't know, like you and I probably know how to do less long division than people who grew up before graphing calculators existed. Is that bad? Like, or have we just learned how to use our brains in a different way? And I'm just curious for you, as a person who like thinks about and writes about and uses AI stuff all day, are you thinking about this stuff in sort of that big, heady, like, what is this doing to my brain kind of way yet?
Yeah, to me, I think about it right now in the way that I think about, Google Maps, like you just said. I mean, I think, we need more research on the long-term effects, but for now, I just think of it as, I can tell I'm not using my brain as much right now. But I don't think there's a long-term effect happening. And I also do think it's really helpful for, like the MIT Media Lab study said, like grunt work, organization. Like I was making a wedding planning spreadsheet the other day, and I was like, I don't need to be, looking at 5 other people's spreadsheets and trying to, combine them myself. I'm just going to have AI do it. So I did. It was great. Yep. And then I still critically thought as much as I could critically think about, like, the certain things I needed to add in there that were missing. But yeah, I mean, for me right now, it's more about making sure I don't over-rely on these systems when I'm using them in my personal life. I turn off memory, for example, because I don't really want a system learning more about me and tailoring its responses to me. I like to treat it as a tool that I ask something and then I leave. It's not, I don't want to be building a relationship with this tool. I know that's controversial. A lot of people do love to do that. But for me personally, I don't want to over-rely on these systems. So that's what I do. And I think it's a great hack if you are worried about that. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think that's the number one way I think about it. It's just how I think about these systems rather than what they're doing to my brain. Because I think, you know what? I'm frying my brain with a bunch of different technology. It's not just AI. I think I'm watching too much Netflix. I'm, texting too much. I am on Instagram too much. I'm on TikTok too much. So
yeah, I think like everything in moderation is as usual pretty good advice. Because I don't know. I think about this as like, there's one way of thinking about this that is like the people who say like, oh, we used to be hunter-gatherers and now we've lost that, and what are we doing? And like when men were men. And I just listen to that and I'm like, yeah, but it's better now. Like I have video games now. Like that's so much better than being a hunter-gatherer. Like what are we talking about? This is I can fight lions or I can watch television. Like I pick television. I don't understand what the problem is. And then on the flip side, you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and you get all of these tech CEOs who are like, in 5 years, there's going to be two types of people. There's going to be the people who have made use of AI in every single corner of their lives, and there's going to be the people who get left behind. And it's like, what was it that Mark Zuckerberg said just the other week? Like, you're going to be at a cognitive disadvantage if you don't use AI. Like, boy, do I not think that's fully true. And I don't know, like part of me is like, are we going to get to the point where actually there's going to be the like Wall-E world of people just like sitting in chairs staring at screens, and then there's just going to be like you and me running around being like, haha, I still know how to type words with my fingers, and that's going to be our advantage. I just don't know, and it's a really tricky thing both as a person and as a reporter right now to reason through, because it's like this stuff is everywhere. People are using it. And like I have a nephew who just started college and I'm sure is just in the middle of ChatGPTing his way through all of his classes. And I'm like, is that a disaster or is that just the inevitable future and everybody needs to catch up? Like some of the pushback I've seen to these studies is that actually what happens when we get these technical advances is that we start to teach different things and we start to test different skills and we start to evaluate people based on new things that they need to be able to do in this new world where being able to quickly do long division is not important because you have a thing in your pocket that can do that for you. We need new tasks and we need new things to do. And that maybe we'll get a whole bunch of that with AI, or we're all just going to sit here slack-jawed talking to Claude for the rest of our lives, and that feels bad. And I don't know. I'm so stuck on this because I don't know how to reason through any of it because we are at just the very beginning of actually starting to understand this stuff.
Definitely. I think it's interesting because I remember being in college and using Cliff's Notes,
yes.
To summarize.
Knew that's what you were going to say.
Yeah, exactly. To summarize books that I didn't really have time to read the whole thing of. And, I do think that teens are going to find workarounds for not doing a lot of work in any universe and with any tech that they have available to them. And it's not something that's like, suddenly happening now for the very first time. I do think it can be tough when these companies allow like every student to access these tools for free during exam period.
Which, to your point about like all they actually want is engagement and they'll figure out the rest later, like what a perfect example.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's, they like to pivot it as, we want people to use learning mode and, kind of be helped with some of the grunt work and the organization of their essays, things like that. But what inevitably happens is that, people lean on it for exams and all sorts of other stuff and kind of get in early and they become a user later in life. It's just kind of cemented early on. So I do think it's a little bit tough, but I also think what you said about testing different things is so real. I mean, now I'm seeing that teachers are starting to, instead of assign a full book, sometimes they'll assign certain chapters or passages and then have everyone talk about them live in class. So that's something I like to see. I mean, obviously, I wish everyone was reading full books, but, at least we're, having people really talk about what they critically thought live during class and, use their brain that way. So, I think it's hard because it's not black and white. But, at least teachers who are saints are adapting to this new world and trying to get students to use their brains in new ways, no matter what's thrown at them, which is great.
Whose responsibility do you think it is ultimately to start pushing on this stuff? Like, obviously, I think you talk to the researchers who are doing some really interesting and important work, and it's very clear that like a lot of people are paying attention to that work, which is great. Like whatever Natalia and that team do next, a lot of people will pay attention to. And I think that's great. Like putting all of the onus on like the high schoolers to make good, responsible decisions about how they use their brain, I think is like a complete fool's errand of an idea. Teachers have too much to do already. Like, I don't know. I can't help but wonder, like, isn't this partly up to the Sam Altmans and Dario Amade's of the world to like if these things are going to be as big and important as they claim, don't they have some responsibility to figure out like what is the actual job we are supposed to put these things to, and what does it mean if we're just mushing everybody's brains in service of giving them more access to ChatGPT?
Yeah, this is kind of why I think it's weird that only a few people are in charge of the implications societally of this. It's interesting that, a lot of the regulation is just starting to kind of percolate right now. And a lot of the past regulation has just been reporters, shining light on stuff, or researchers shining light on stuff. So it is interesting, especially because we don't have, as we said before, a lot of information on how this looks long term and how it affects people. I think on the one hand, these companies are saying, hey, we introduced learning mode. We introduced these certain modes for students where, the chatbot isn't just giving them the answer. It's helping them reason through, a line of thinking. It's kind of using the Socratic method in a way. But how well can it really do that? I haven't tried it. And, I'm sure there's a workaround for not doing that, which students will probably find. On the one hand, it is a student's responsibility in some ways to want to learn, because we've all found workarounds when we didn't want to learn something. That's just, what we're going to do.
Right.
But I also think the easier it is to not learn something, the more tempting it is to not sometimes, if you're a student in college or high school. So
not doing the work is so sick. Like, it's so fun to not do the work. And we were actually just talking about this with some folks the other day, that like one of my great joys as an adult has been going back and reading all the books that I fake read in high school.
Same.
And learning that actually like Catcher in the Rye is like awesome. And there's like a bunch of like, Jane Eyre style books that I like pretended to read in high school and college that now I've gone back and I'm like, oh, these books actually like kind of rip, dude. Like,
I've been doing the same thing, like Beloved by Toni Morrison. I've been really,
yes.
I saved them all to put in my bookshelf in the living room, which is my performative bookshelf. And I have like a non-performative, like kind of like dumb bookshelf in my bedroom. And all the ones on display in the living room, I'm now working my way through.
I love that for you. That's awesome. So one last thing, the way you were talking about these tools makes me think about like, I think the like notebook LMs of the world. I wonder if things like that end up being sort of the right middle ground, where it's like and maybe this goes back to the stuff that Microsoft study was talking about, that it's like these things should be additive tools for things that you are already gaining competence in, right? That like maybe the AI's job is to help you find information that you're looking for, or pull things into study guides and flashcards and whatever, but like it shouldn't be able to put out a finished product for you. And I think like, I know the Notebook LM team has spent a lot of time thinking about like, what does it mean to help you do the work versus do the work for you? And I just think that kind of thing, like it's really easy for me to come out of these things being like, just shut it all off, turn off the internet in high schools, and like make everybody go back to writing by hand in blue books. And like, there's part of me that thinks that, but most of me thinks that's just like a ignorant way of thinking about what the world actually is now. And so it's like, maybe what is the middle ground? Does it exist? Do you think it exists?
I hope so. I hope it does. And I think based on history, and other technologies, I think it does. I mean, and I think what you just said is the middle ground. Technology can help us come to our own conclusions. It can ask smart questions sometimes and have us think and really figure out what our opinion is, and then we answer. So I hope that's the, line we go down, because, everyone has a friend that's amazing at asking questions and kind of helps you really figure out how you feel about something when you didn't really know before. And I hope that, in schools and with students, AI can become that. If we do have to use it, let's make it that, instead of just, giving you the answer all the time, which I think, to their credit, companies are trying to figure out how to do. But I don't know if it's working yet. I have not used them myself. That would be a good thing for us to test. But yeah, I mean, it's all a mess right now, and I just hope it works out is all I have to say.
That's a hopeful message to end on. Yeah, I just keep thinking about that part of the MIT study that is basically like, when we got to the end of this trial with folks, the people who had LLM access weren't doing any work anymore. They were essentially doing the like procedural work of copying and pasting stuff in an order that kind of made sense, and that was the amount of actual cognitive interest that they were doing, because they had just decided to offload all of it to the machines. And I think anybody who has used Google's AI overviews knows that we're super not there yet. I don't know if we ever will be. I don't know if it's a good thing, but we're super not there yet.
And the fact that they couldn't quote essays that they wrote minutes before.
Yeah.
So it really didn't sink in, which sucks. Like, that's the thing that I feel like we need to see is, even if people use technology to accomplish whatever in schools, you have to be able to explain it and talk about it after so that it sinks in. Maybe that's the answer, because I find that for me, I learn the best when I'm explaining how something works to someone else, like out loud. That's how I learn. And that's why, like, oftentimes before I'm, going to go on, a TV segment or something, I call a friend and I'm like, let me just explain this to you really quick. And they're like, they work in like marketing, or like they're a hiker and they're like a full-time hiker. And they're like, I'm going to use a different example because that sounds like I made that up, but that was real. And they work in marketing, or they're like, just retired. And I'm like, let me tell you exactly how this random thing works that you have no interest in, just so that I can know that I fully understand it before I go and explain it to a lot of people. So yeah,
you sound like a comedian developing like their type 5 to go on a late night show. I love this for you. All right, we need to take a break, but I just want to prepare you for this, Hayden. At some point, you are going to come back on this show and you are going to walk us through the technology and AI of your wedding planning process. So just be ready, because I have a feeling it is spectacular and insane, and I'm very, very excited to talk about it.
I can't wait to tell you all about it. It is crazy.
All right, we got to take one more break, and then we're going to come back and answer a question from the Vergecast Hotline. Be right back.
Support for this show comes from Wealthfront. When markets feel unpredictable, finding a safe place for your money can be hard. With Wealthfront's cash account, earn a 4% APY on your uninvested cash from program banks with no minimum balance or account fees. Plus, you get free, instant withdrawals to eligible accounts every day, so your money is always accessible when you need it. No matter your goals, Wealthfront gives you flexibility and security. Right now, open your first cash account with a $500 deposit and get a $50 bonus at wealthfront.com/Verge. That's wealthfront.com/Verge. Bonus terms and conditions apply. Cash account offered by Wealthfront Brokerage, LLC. Member FINRA SPIC, not a bank. Annual percentage yield on deposits as of September 26, 2025 is representative, subject to change, and requires no minimum. Funds are swept to program banks where they earn the variable APY.
Support for this show comes from LinkedIn. When you're a small business owner, your business is on your mind 24/7. So when you're hiring, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. LinkedIn's new features can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. Either post your job for free or pay to promote. Promoted jobs get 3 times more qualified applicants. At the end of the day, the most important thing to your small business is the quality of candidates. And with LinkedIn, you can feel confident that you're getting the best. Based on LinkedIn data, 72% of SMBs using LinkedIn say that it helps them find high-quality candidates. Find out why more than 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. Find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/track. That's linkedin.com/track to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Support for this show comes from Anthropic. Claude is the AI built for developers who don't settle for good enough. It's not just another chatbot. It's a coding collaborator that works alongside you. Claude can help you reason through problems, explore alternatives, and arrive at cleaner, smarter solutions. And with MCP connectors, you can plug Claude directly into your workflow. GitHub, Jira, Notion, Google Workspace, and more, turning it into your coding command center with full context across your projects. And with Claude Code, you're not just getting an assistant, you're getting an agent built for the frontier of software development. It combines the latest Claude models with tools optimized for coding, so it can handle project-wide changes, manage dependencies, and refactor, all while respecting your conventions. The result? You write better code faster without ever giving up ownership of the process. Ready to tackle bigger problems? You can sign up for Claude today and get 50% off Claude Pro, which includes access to Claude Code when you use this link, claude.ai/Verge. That's claude.ai/Verge right now for 50% off your first 3 months of Claude Pro. That includes access to all of the features mentioned in today's episode. claude.ai/Verge.
Okay, we're back. Sean's back. We have a question from the Vergecast Hotline. As always, the number is 866-VERGE11. The email is vergecast@theverge.com. You can go knock on Sean's door and ask him questions if you have them. We're all on Signal. I don't know. I go outside sometimes. You find me there. This question, Sean, is sort of a thing I've been thinking a lot about recently, and I just want to feel you out on this, but I didn't want to prepare you at all because I just want to get your gut reaction. Let's hear this question.
Hello, Vergecast friends. This is not so much a question as a revelation. I was just listening to the episode where you were talking about Chrome OS and Android and the seamless experience. I am a longtime Android user and Windows user and have had the tablet that disconnects from the dock that's supposed to be your computer. I've gone through all of it. And I have a revelation. For an Android and Windows user, the perfect experience is a two-screen laptop where the Verge Book Duo, which I have, and the Asus ZenBook Duo, which I have and I love. And the keyboard comes off and the kickstand for the two screens. Take all of that, except the top screen can detach, and it is your lightweight Android Chrome tablet. I think I've cracked it.
Sean, detachable PCs.
My God.
We're here, we're talking about hybrid devices. I've been thinking about this where we're talking about touchscreen MacBooks. How do you do the Chrome? Detachable PCs are the future of everything. Are they the future of everything?
I feel like I'm being transported right back to 2012.
Yes,
when
we're
I was
just doing this again.
I think I was at CES, and there was a giant fountain. Oh no, it was Computex because I was in Taipei, and there were just all of these giant. There was a giant detachable all-in-one PC sitting on a stone, like the stone pillar next to this giant fountain, and next to that there was a detachable ePC from Asus, and the screen would come out of the keyboard region. But the dual screen thing, you're right, the dual screen thing. So I have now played with several dual screen devices, or devices with a giant stretchy screen that decides to become two screens when you partition it virtually. And there is really something not to having two screens, that I don't care about at all, but having a very big vertical screen in front of you that you can partition into any number of windows you want. But reaching for those screens to touch them is kind of weird. So if the top one popped off, that would be great. The thing I can't figure out is how you would create any kind of hinge and detachment mechanism that would make that not fall apart at the slightest touch. Because even some of the dual screen PCs I've strapped to dual screen laptops, those hinges are kind of weird.
The only one I've ever had that felt really good was, I think it was the Surface Book. The very first one, and I don't even know if they made more than one of these, but it had a pretty solid hinge that you had a little eject button and you pulled it out, and then it went in and it really thunked in and felt like a lot. And that was the only one I've ever used that I was like, this I could just use and not feel like it was going to break every single time I touched it.
The only one. And I met some people who bought that, and they said that over time, some things didn't always connect up properly electronically, and there were some issues with discrete graphics and things like that. But I don't think they said that the hinge failed on them. The hinge is a really great hinge. Really great hinge, really great detachment mechanism.
Do you think chip-wise we're ready for this world? Because is it possible that in 2012 we just didn't have the internals we needed to do this? But now, with some combination of, internal graphics are getting better, external graphics are getting better and cheaper. Like the idea of basically I have a tablet that I dock into a gaming PC seems very powerful and compelling, and like it might kind of be possible now. Like
100%.
put a Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite into the tablet-y bit of it, and it'll still sort of run like a Windows computer, sort of. Dock it and give me like full-on gaming PC stuff.
Yeah, USB 4. I mean, USB 4 with the bandwidth, especially with USB 4 version 2 coming out with the 80 gigabit per second bandwidth, I believe. Single port. You plug in your tablet. As long as it's got that kind of a connection in it, you can do the external graphics, you can do the data, you can do the multiple monitors, you can do the power all at the same time. All of that would work fine. And the chips are efficient enough that, you know, if they can fit in a handheld, if they can fit in a thick tablet, they can fit in that tablet too. Making the top tablet, if you want that to be like the entire computer, if you want that to be the entire computer, that thin and light, you might need to look at ARM, like David is saying. You might need to be Qualcomm. And in that case, I don't know how much of the USB for external graphics kind of goodness you get. I don't think they've figured out external graphics yet on the Qualcomm stuff. So if it were AMD or Intel plus external, that would be a little bit easier. I think that this detachable tablet, if you don't care very much about how long it lasts when it's away from the rest of the system, like you're taking this thing off for an hour, you're using it on the couch, then you put it back in so that it can charge and connect, I think you'll have a better time than if you're expecting the tablet to be your 8-hour computer.
That makes sense. Yeah, it does sort of sound like, as you describe it, I'm thinking, oh, what this actually is just two computers bolted together. Because you need all the stuff in the one, but then you need all the other more powerful stuff in the other. And now we've just built two computers, and this thing is going to cost like $3,000 and not actually solve any of your problems. Which I think is the thing we discovered in 2012. Is that what we need is better software for multiple devices, not hardware that shoves them all together.
Please do not give the designers ideas, David.
What if they had all of the processors? What if I just put all the possible chips into a device and we just see what happens? It could work. So, but I think about this from both a like productivity perspective, where like I like the idea of, you know, being able to, instead of like the iPad Magic Keyboard to me is the perfect example of this. I feel like Apple has gone way out of its way to have this funky hinge, and that's all well and good, but I would rather have something that looks like a MacBook that I can just pull the two pieces apart. That to me is like, that's where something cool and interesting starts to happen. And the same with a lot of these other devices, but I think about this with gaming in particular, that is like, is there a reason that I might want something like external graphics for, you know, that's worth spending the money on, so that I can have this truly like high-end PC thing that I can just rip off the top half of and take to the coffee shop? And
I think a lot of companies and a lot of users are like scared of mechanical points of failure. Like you don't want too many mechanical points of failure on anything, because inevitably those will fail. Their support calls and so on. You have to engineer the crap out of it, like that Microsoft Surface Book. But I want it. I want everything to be modular. I love this idea of, I saw this crazy thing at CES this last year where it was an Intel Lunar Lake, Panther, one of those two, tablet thing, compute module you stick into the laptop frame, or you take it out and stick it into the tablet frame, and then it's your tablet, and they hinge together, and there's like mechanical motorized things to turn the screen to face you while you're walking around the room. Just a complete concept. And I said, well, there are like 3 good ideas in here. If anybody wants to actually produce this hardware, it would be super cool, and just a small handful of nerds like me will love the heck out of it.
Yeah, I both think this is the wrong idea and think I would love it absolutely to pieces, which I think is basically where we landed in 2012. Like this thing is so fun and delightful and makes sense for almost no one. But I have wanted it ever since. And this is my hill that I will always die on, is modular gadgets, which might be impossible and might be useless, but they're so fun and I love them so much.
Is it time to do the modular phone? I feel like phones have finally plateaued to the degree that manufacturers just don't know what to do with the hardware anymore. The rounded rectangles, beside AI. At the time when Google did Project Ara, tried to make modular phones a thing, tried to make those cameras modular, there just wasn't enough reason, because there was still innovation happening elsewhere. But now that there isn't, much hardware innovation elsewhere. Can we bring it back? Please bring it back.
Just let me attach weird lenses to my phone and you will have my business forever. This is all I ask. All right. Sometime you're going to come back and we're going to talk about Project Aura, but that's probably a version history episode that we'll do at some point, and I'm very excited about that. For now, if someone is making this Chrome Windows thing that actually might seem possible to exist, I would like to hear about it. And until then, Sean, thank you. This was delightful.
Thank you.
All right, that is it for the Vergecast. Thank you to Sean and Hayden for being here, and thank you, as always, for listening. If you have thoughts or questions or feelings or other mean things you'd like to say about the Xbox Ally and Xbox Ally X, as always, you can call the hotline, 866-VERGE11. You can send us an email, vergecast@theverge.com. 2 quick things before we go. One, hopefully you've heard on the show or on the feed by now that we have ad-free podcasts, but if you're a subscriber to The Verge, you can now go to your account settings and get ad-free versions of all of our shows, The Vergecast, Version History, and Decoder. It's awesome. Thank you to everybody who has been excited about this. This was the #1 thing people were asking us for. Super excited to be able to do it. I signed up for the ad-free podcasts. I'm a big fan. Let us know if you're having trouble with it, but it is awesome. Cannot recommend it enough. Thing number 2, thanks to everybody who's been reaching out about version history. We're now 3 episodes deep. We've got 5 more in this run. We're already working on the next ones. We've gotten tons of really good feedback, so please keep it coming. Things you want to see, things you want us to make episodes about, different ways you want us to do the show. We've gotten really interesting feedback on like the structure and tone and pace of the show. Keep it all coming. We're about to make a bunch more of these, and I want to know everything you think about all of these already before we get into it. But for now, we're just going to get out of here. The Vergecast is a Verge production and part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. This show is produced by Eric Gomez, Brandon Kiefer, and Travis Larchuk. Neil and I will be back on Friday to talk about just all of the news. There's more news. We have Apple reviews. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. AI continues to just AI. I don't even know what to say anymore. We're going to have a lot to talk about. We'll see you then. Rock and roll.